Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. I have another Hardpoint spawn guide. This time we are in Tokyo. It's the last Hardpoint spawn guide I'm going to do of the new maps of Season 6. I know there's only a couple weeks left of the season itself before, well, not of the season, but before MW3 Ranked play closes, which is a shame. Yeah, I thought I'd do it anyway. It might make the difference in whether you're not you're able to achieve a certain rank or not. So yeah, I thought it would be beneficial to share anyway. It may only get a few hundred views, but if it helps a few hundred people out, it's I'm all for it. So we're going to kick it off with P1. It's a super simple hill. The main spawns are pink and blue, with no spawn really being considered better than the other. It's completely personal choice. So fight for whatever spawn you see fit. Chances are you're just going to spawn into one side at the beginning of the map, and that's what you're going to be fighting from. The only thing I would say is that it's slightly easier to rotate to P2 from pink, which is why I've made that the pink, i.e. the better spawn. Before we get too much further in, for those of you who this is the first spawn guide from, quick overview of what these symbols mean. The rings are the spawn points. Red and pink and blue are typically the main spawn points, and the shaded areas are where you can block that spawn from. You can also block the spawn by being in it or by looking at it. The chances of you spawning somewhere where an enemy is looking is super slim. So yeah, they're the main spawns for P1. Now, alternative spawns for both are yellow. So if both of these two spawns are blocked by someone being there or looking at it or being in these shaded areas, it opens up this yellow spawn. So we're going to have a look at what could happen, okay? So let's say if you spawn blue or pink and your team are also spawning there, there's nothing too much to note. It's just the normal spawn you've got. Now, if you spawn blue or pink and your team are spawning the other side, it generally means the enemy is trying to flip your spawns and has successfully done so. So if you end up spawning the other side of the map to your teammates alone, it generally means the enemy team has pushed all the way around and are blocking that spawn. And as a result, you've spawned here without the enemy being close enough to this spawn to block it. Now, if you spawn yellow, it's a really weird situation where you would spawn yellow. It essentially means that the enemies are likely coming from both sides. So just be really careful and make sure that this is communicated to the rest of your team that you spawn there. Let's say, for example, your team is spawning here. You've ended up spawning here. That means there's probably enemies coming off a pink spawn. Otherwise, you would have just spawned pink instead. So yeah, super simple hill. But obviously, if there's any questions you guys have throughout this video, drop it down in the comments below. There will be a Google Doc of this guide where you can have it up on your phone, your second monitor, or your laptop whilst you're playing, which will hopefully help you a little bit more. And again, that's in Discord, or which you can find down below just in the Spawn Guide channel. So moving into P2 here, another simple hill. Okay, the main spawns, as I say, are blue and pink, with pink being slightly preferred because of how close it is to P3. For P2 itself, it's fairly 50-50. You can see they're quite close to the hill, and both alternative spawns are just as far away. But because of how close it is to P3, I do prefer the pink spawn, and the fact you can have the height overlooking from both sides as well. But yeah, in summary, the reason I've chosen pink as my preferred spawn is because of the P3. But again, it's up to you which ones you get. But I'm going to, talk to you as if no matter what spawn you're trying to get, okay? Now, yellow is the alternative spawn to pink, and teal is the alternative spawn to blue. And essentially, being on the hill or holding control of this middle street will block the enemy's primary spawns. So if you're on the pink team and you're in P2 or around P2, the enemy will no longer spawn here, they'll spawn here. And similarly, if you're on this right-hand side and you're on the hill, the enemy team won't be able to spawn pink, they'll actually spawn back yellow. So it's very sensitive. So chances are what will happen is the spawns are either yellow and blue, or because blue will tend to have control, and that way you'll spawn yellow, or the spawns are typically pink and teal, again, because pink, to spawn here, they have to have control of P2. And if they have control of P2, the blue team will get spawned back into teal. So it's relatively simple. So again, if you spawn a pink or blue, your team also spawn in here. It means that this is your main spawn. Okay, so this is the first scenario, and it's super simple. Now, if you spawn yellow and you were spawning pink, it usually means the enemy has control of the hill. And likewise, if you were spawning blue and now you're spawned in teal, it means the enemy has control of the hill or that general area. So even if you spawn teal, for example, or yellow, and the enemy isn't strictly on the hill, you must have spawned there because the enemy has control of this area of the map. So just be careful that if you spawn here and you approach P2, even though they might not be on it, they're going to be close. So just be aware that, that's a little bit of information you probably do need when you're pushing it. Now, if you happen to spawn on the other side and flip, it generally means the enemy has control, has managed to get through to your side and is blocking both the spawns you were meant to be spawning in. So, for example, if you were spawning pink and you somehow ended up spawning teal, it generally means someone from the blue team has taken an effort to go all the way around and have got themselves between these two spawns and therefore blocking both of these spawns. Now, the best way to play this hill is to play for the kills, either way, and then progress up with map control. And then once you get to at least 30 seconds left of the hill, start to think about P3. Now, P3 is a really big hill to play for. If you have pink spawns, stretch your defense across to P1 so enemies just can't run, round towards P3 for free. And you've got that block. However, if you're spawning blue side and you're trying to rotate to P3, you really need one or two to push through P1 to try and just, push out P3. And then in order to get the spawns, I would suggest not just sitting on P3 and being happy with that. You want to push through P3 itself and get these spawns, causing the pink team and the yellow team, whatever you want to call it, to flip just as P3 is about to pop. That's the easiest way to get initial control of P3. Now, P3 is a little more complex than the first two. And essentially, in the biggest summary possible, the first kill will get you the spawn. It's very simply put, that's how it is. So if you get the first kill chance, you're going to end up with the good spawns. If they get the first kill chance, you're going to end up with the bad spawns, okay? So as I say, the main spawn is pink, and obviously it's the best spawn to have because of how close it is to P3. It's literally on the hill pretty much. But it's very hard to maintain pink spawns because of how many block spots there are. You can see all these little pink marks. Now, if pink is blocked, the next spawn available will be blue, which is why I say if you end up getting the first kill on P3, chances are you're in the hill or something like that. You get the first kill. They're not going to spawn here because you're on the hill, so they're just going to spawn blue. And that's the start of the motion of them being stuck spawning at blue over and over and over again. Now, the only reason why they wouldn't spawn blue is if someone on your team. So let's say you get the first kill on P3. Your team is sort of all the way this side. They're going to spawn blue. But if you have a teammate who is sort of lingering in this blue shaded area or is running through blue itself for some reason, the enemy won't be able to spawn here and they will naturally spawn over at yellow. So just be careful that when you're getting kills at P3 and you've got teammates push through towards P4, that the enemy team are likely to spawn behind you down deep in this corner. Okay, so it's essentially you'll spawn pink unless pink is blocked. If pink is blocked, you'll spawn blue unless it's blocked. If both pink and blue are blocked, you'll spawn yellow, and if pink, blue, and yellow are blocked, you'll then spawn red, which is a little bit of a rogue spawn, middle of the map. I'm not sure what the logic is for it being there. I personally think it should be a little bit further out, or even down here, but yeah, this is a weird spot for it to be, but in any case, that's what it is. Now, generally speaking, if your team has pink spawns, you'll probably spawn pink unless the enemy team starts contesting the hill, at which case you'll spawn yellow. And you'll only really flip to blue if the blue team completely releases the spawn, and you will then spawn behind them. So yeah, it's a little bit of a weird spawning pattern. It's not based on where your team are and your team anchoring spawns. It's basically pink, then blue, then yellow, then red, depending on what's blocked and what's not. So again, to try and simplify this, we're going to take some scenarios. So if you're to spawn pink and your team has control of the hill, nothing to note, just your normal spawn. Now, if you spawn blue and your team does not have control of P3, it means, again, there's nothing to note, normal spawn for you. Now, if you spawn blue, but your team does have control of P3, it means the enemy is, at the back of P3, it's blocking pink, and likely spawning yellow. Okay, so that's the thing to take from that. Now, if you spawn yellow, it means the enemy is both blocking blue and pink. So you typically have this when an enemy is spawning blue, and they also have hill control, you'll then spawn yellow because pink will be blocked because they've got hill control and blue will be blocked because that's where they're spawning. So naturally you'll spawn here as the next available spawn location. Now, if you spawn red and your team does not have control of the pink and yellow area, it means enemies are pretty much everywhere. So be super, super careful. Red is a really weird spawn. So if you find yourself spawning here and your teammates aren't around you, just be very careful. That it's probably because enemies are lingering everywhere. So just check your corners, maybe play a little bit slower to get some freebies, because chances are people aren't going to read that spawn and you're going to get people just walk right out in front of you. Now, strategy-wise, obviously you want to try and obtain pink spawns at all costs because of how close they are to the hill and how beneficial they are to have. An easy way to block the enemy from spawning pink is to push through P2. Now, the easiest way to get spawns is to stop the enemy from getting them first and then getting the kills and then getting the control of that spawn point. So, which is why I say the best way to do that is to block the pink spawn, maybe by pushing, from P2 to the mid cut, which will block pink spawn, but then you'll need to try and ensure that your team is clear of blue. Otherwise, the enemy is just going to spawn back here. So, yeah, you want to try and push up to the pink's block, get the kills, whilst without being in this blue area here. The enemy will then spawn at blue, meaning you can push the hill pretty freely. As I said, I'm going to reiterate this. I might be repeating myself, but hopefully it stays in your head. If you are in the pink area, getting kills, but your team is in the blue area, the enemy team will literally just spawn here. So you're not doing much of a difference by doing that. The only thing that will, that might lead to is them being spawn trapped in this little corner here. But again, if you push that out too aggressively, they'll simply spawn red. So just be very careful. So yeah, essentially, as I say, you just need to get the first kill and spawn the enemy blue for the best chance of success. Because pretty much once you have the enemy team spawning at blue over and over again, they're naturally just going to be blocking the blue spawn because of how quickly people die and respawn on this game. And what that will mean is that even if you are dying from pink spawns, you're just going to spawn here, and that's still a decent, spawn to the hill because it's just as close as blue is anyway, and that's your secondary spawn. So yeah, as I say, it's a little bit more complex, but let me know if there is any sort of questions you have on this, because I know it can be a little bit complicated, but it should be fine. Hopefully I've cleared it up and made it as clear as possible. So P4 is fairly easy hill to understand. Again, main spawns are pink and blue. Pink better because of how close it is to the hill itself and how well you can cut off P4 using this mid cut just from spawn. So you can run off from pink, get to this area, and you can literally watch the cut from the blue spawn to the hill really quite easily. So that's why I prefer this hill, even though it does seem in the depths, and even though it is quite far away from P5. Teal is the alternative spawn to blue, and obviously yellow is the alternative spawn for pink. And spawns are generally decided based on the map control and map weight. So say if your team has got the majority of control of this to the right of P4, you'll spawn on either of these. However, if your team has the majority of map control to the left of P4, so this area here, you're likely going to spawn either of these two. And that's how it's sort of decided what side you spawn on. Now, again, we're going to look at the scenario. So if you spawn blue and your team is there, just a regular spawn, nothing to note. Similarly, if you spawn pink and your team are on the hill and you have this side of the map control, that's why it's just a regular spawn. So yeah, if you spawn pink or blue with your team, nothing to note, nothing to worry about. If you spawn yellow, it generally means the enemy has pushed up to P4 from the blue side and therefore blocking the pink spawn, spawning you a little bit further away, being a little bit more inconvenient for you. Now, if you spawn out at teal and your team has got control of the P1 area, let's say you're spawning blue and you spawn teal and your team does have control of P1 area, that means an enemy has pushed through P4 and is blocking the blue spawn, but they're also blocking this spawn because their team are weighted this side, and as a result, you've spawned teal. So just be very careful that if you spawn teal, but your teammates are here, just tell your teammates that there's going to be someone really close, because otherwise you're just spawned right on them. Now, if you spawn teal and your team has literally zero map control towards P1 area here, that'll be why you're not spawning blue. You need teammates in this general area here where my cursor is in order to get these close spawns at blue. Now, strategy-wise, getting pink spawns early on is obviously key, as it is on every hill. But you can do that if you don't quite get it successfully off the when the hill switches to P4. A nice easy way to do that is to push through P1, but these will obviously spawn the enemy and push through P1 to pinch P4. But be careful that if you do that, you're going to be blocking both pink and yellow spawns. So just be very careful that the enemy team then will spawn behind you. So if you are taking a route and you are getting kills and you are in these spawn areas when the enemy team are respawning, communicate to your team that the enemy team might be spawning behind them a little bit at teal whilst they're pushing their front. So just be very careful. It can lead to a lot of frustration if that isn't communicated. Once you have flipped and you have got control of pink, you really need to create almost a defensive line across this line that I'm drawing my cursor. Essentially, it's two lanes you need to watch. Main front hill and then the left in case you end up spawning them at teal, because oftentimes if they spawn teal, they like to take a little bit of a different route to P4. So you need to make sure you've got both of these lanes covered whilst there's someone on the hill on P4. So you can have maybe attribute one player here, one player here, one player on here, and then one player just between helping out whoever needs more help. And then, as I say, when it gets to the end of P4, you do sort of want to try and push through P1 to get to these blue spawns because, as I say, it's close to P5 and you're going to probably rotate better if you do have the blue spawns when it gets to the end of P4. Now, moving to P5, as always, this hill plays, well, not as always, this hill plays a lot like P2, so it's, again, really, really simple. The main spawns are blue and pink. I've put pink as the slightly preferred spawn because... one, it's a little bit close to P5, and two, you've got so much more map control just off the spawn. You can get top P5 here. You can go L and hold the cut from the enemy team to the hill. So it's just a nicer way to set up when you have pink spawns. Blue, it's a little bit more of a struggle. You've got to almost run a little bit more linear to the hill, and it's a little bit more easy for them to read you, which is why I prefer these spawns back here. Now, as I say, as always, yellow is an alternative spawn to pink, and teal is the alternative spawn to blue. And either blue or pink spawns can be blocked by having control of P5. So again, very similar to what we saw in P2, where let's say you're the blue team and the enemy team are on P5, you're just going to spawn back here. And on the flip side of that, if you're spawning on the left, but the enemy team from this side has got control of P5, you're going to be spawned out back here. So yeah, let's take some scenarios, try and simplify this down a little bit. Now, if you spawn a pink and blue with your team, there's nothing to note, you're just spawning normally. So if you spawn in pink and your teammates are all there, fine, spawning normal, nothing to worry about. Now, if you spawn yellow from pink, it either means the enemy has control of P5 or they have control of the area past P5, stopping you from spawning in pink. But what that also means is they're also blocking this spawns, because what will tend to happen if the enemy from the right side pushes too far up, you'll simply flip. But obviously you won't flip if they've also got people coming off spawn, and as a result, you'll simply just, your spawn will be bumped back. It's fairly straightforward. Now, if you spawn teal from blue, it's essentially the same thing. It means the enemy has control of P5, or they've pushed through P5 and obtained control of the area between your spawn and P5 itself, and therefore the game's decided that you deserve to be spawned a little bit further out because you don't have the map control. Now, if you end up spawning the other side of the map to your teammates, it essentially means the enemy team have pushed all the way through P5, as I said before, and infiltrated your spawn. So yeah, fairly logical. I think it makes sense. I think these are relatively easy spawns to understand when you're in-game, even if you haven't heard this sort of breakdown. So yeah, as a final bit of a strategy-wise, it doesn't really matter what hill you have, what spawns you have, but personally I prefer pink, as I said before, and you want to try and rotate to this pink spawn at the end of P4 to give yourself the best chances of winning the most hill time on P5 itself. Now, when you do get the pink spawn, make sure you have the height control, as I said, from top P5, and you have the cut between, you have someone lingering here, able in like the cut off between the blue spawn and P5 itself. If you have someone here watching the cross, they can pick across, they can pick and at least communicate anyone crossing from their spawn to P5. And that will just make it really, really hard for the blue team to get any hill time at all. Now, if you're not fortunate enough to win the pink spawns off the start off P5, the best way to take a flip is to flip the spawns so you do have pink, is when you spawn blue, just take a little bit of a route for P1. The map's not massive, it doesn't take you too long, but go through P1, then go through P3, I believe that is, and just rotate all the way through and then pinch. What that will likely do is spawn the enemy team. It'll block both of these two spawns and spawn the enemy team to the right, and then you'll have the better spawns for the remainder of the hill. But yeah, what you can also do, you can also sneak through. If you do that and you don't quite flip, you can decide to, instead of going all the way through P3, you can decide to take the mid-cut here, jump up to this building and, get into the window, shoot people in the back as they're looking towards the spawn, and just free up this space for your team, and then simply try and spawn trap them back here. That's also a viable option. It just depends how much time you've got left of the hill, because you don't want to work really hard for a flip for then just to be 10 seconds left of the hill. It doesn't really make too much sense to do that. So yeah, that's Tokyo Hardpoint. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it's somewhat useful. And yeah, let me know what you want to see next on the channel. I'm intrigued to know what you guys want before Black Ops 6 comes out. A little bit of a dead zone at the moment, but we're doing what we can to help you guys win as much matches while MW3 Ranked is still live. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you enjoyed. Ciao for now.